Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, as this is the main event you've all been waiting for. Brought to you by Axonius, the cybersecurity asset management company. It's time!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast with Virtual Coffee with Ashish. Today we are talking about CNAPP and, well, I'm not going to try and explain CNAPP because I think I've got someone better to talk about this than I am. But before we get into this, I think for some reason LinkedIn is not liking the feed. So what I was going to do was I was going to drop in the link for the YouTube channel on LinkedIn if it doesn't go happen there. Actually, it is live. So don't worry. Ignore me over there. Hi, people from LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere. Lovely to see you all. So for bringing my guest in, let me just cue in his own music. Did I just say his own music? Yes, it is his own music. So here you go. If I should hit the play button right. Hey, welcome, man.
Thanks, Ashish.
Oh my God! Like I think I'm always amazed how many talented people in cybersecurity are there. So that was your own produced music, and I'll definitely check. I'll drop the link in the show notes so people can go check that out as well. But welcome to the show. Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate for having me, Ashish. Always fun to be with you.
No problem, man. I think, and cheers, by the way. Thanks for coming with a drink as well. This is my Virtual Coffee with Ashish these days because the online world has taken over. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, appreciate it.
So maybe a good place for us to start would be for people who don't know who Om is, a bit about yourself and how did you get into cybersecurity?
Well, a quick intro about me is I'm a serial cybersecurity entrepreneur, and I recently was co-founder, CISO of a company called Accurics. We recently got acquired by Tenable, and I've been in cybersecurity over 15 years now. And I got into cybersecurity because someone identified some kind of talent in me which I didn't knew I possessed, and I was advised, hey, why don't you not try? You have an inquisitiveness of knowing things and going into deeper second level details. Why don't you not try doing some work around cybersecurity, gain some experience or gain some certifications? And that's how kind of I got more into cybersecurity. However, my first job was as a software engineer at a cybersecurity startup. So I wasn't too much far away from cybersecurity as a subject, but I took interest into the subject only after working for 1.5 years as a software engineer at the beginning of my career.
All right, so software engineer to cybersecurity, kind of like the transition.
Yeah, so application software development, and from there got into cybersecurity. I started very opposite than what I see people doing in cybersecurity world. People who are interested in kind of offensive and defensive side of things, they don't usually start from audit. But I started, my cybersecurity journey got started with CISA certification as my first kind of attempt to understand how audit works. And from there, I got into pen testing, OSCP, and then practiced, all sorts of cybersecurity disciplines, at Australia, actually, at Melbourne, working for a consulting company.
That's awesome, man. I was going to say, it's always good to have a Melbourneite, for lack of a better word. Like, sounds like kryptonite, but like a Melbourneite making it happen as well. And congratulations on Accurics being acquired by Tenable as well. I think a regular of ours, Zina, she's a previous guest as well. She's already the coolest guest with his own beat. There you go. You're getting recognition already. So I'll definitely leave the music beat in the show notes as well. We'll get into that as well. But so for people who don't know what is CNAPP, maybe a good place to start could be what do you define as cloud security or cloud native security? What does that mean for you?
Look, if we really have to kind of at high level, what CNAPP is, um, you know, we need to kind of go a little bit back in the history, and um, around 2000, between 2014 and 2016, when the CASB industry, cloud access security broker industry, was kind of at a maturity curve, and we saw introduction of CSPMs, cloud security posture management. So CSPM products, their focus has been to detect the level of posture from the point of view of compliance, misconfigurations, and best practices, how much of those you have kind of implemented while developing and while operating your cloud environments, right? It's more of a CISO focused product, and the outcome is pretty much around compliance. Detection is part of it, but compliance is there. And then we saw around 2015, 16, we saw, companies like Twistlock introducing one of the first CWPPs, cloud workload protection platforms, whose primary responsibility is to protect your workloads from, network-based attacks, as well as host-based protection equivalent in the container world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, CNAPP is, if I have to give you a very short definition, is kind of a combination of CSPM, CWPP, and everything that you would have to do to secure your cloud from code, DevSecOps, and from deployment point of view, right? When you put these three aspects together, of course, there's a lot more to talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, primary purpose is to source findings from these different cloud security paradigms, and create a result which determines a holistic risk that you can kind of possess in a cloud environment. It's like, let's say you have a very simple web application deployed on a cloud environment, which is running on an, say, AWS. It's running on EC2 instance. It's part of a subnet. It has a database which is running on another subnet, right? And then
Yep.
you have a load balancer, which is basically, forwarding the traffic to this EC2 instance using target groups. There are some security groups being used. There are some IAM roles being used.
Yep.
A product that can tell you that, listen, you have deployed a web application which has a SSRF vulnerability running on this EC2 instance. Since it is exposed to internet because of the routing that exists between ELB and this application that is being hosted, and because of overly permissive IAM role that you have on this EC2 instance, and another misconfiguration that you have on it, attacker, if it takes over this EC2 instance, can directly also dump the database. If there's a product which can tell you all this entire story, by now, CSPM would have only told you that your EC2 instances have got misconfigurations. That's about it. No context, right? Likewise, a CWPP product would have told you you have vulnerabilities on this EC2 instance, or if there was a container involved, it would have told you the vulnerability, right? But when you have to be able to stitch these different results together with the story of an attack path or a breach path, right? That's the primary purpose of CNAPP. But of course, from the business perspective, it's being designed as a space. It's designed to create this single glass of pane kind of visualizations as well for CISOs as well as for CTO organizations. And there's a lot more detail into it, but that's kind of a 100,000 feet high gist of what CNAPP is and its purposes.
Yep. It kind of makes sense as well, but it also, as you kind of mentioned it from an evolution perspective, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that should have been like the obvious thing for it to happen. But it sounds like, but for people who may not be from, I guess, that space of beginning of the cloud world, to see the transition of CSPM, CWPP, and now there's another one, CNAPP, and you're like, oh my God, like what is this CNAPP thing that I have to get used to now? So from that perspective, it kind of makes sense what people are trying to do. But I would say, is there a, how do I put this? So you mentioned it's end to end, and you mentioned DevSecOps in there as well, and you mentioned the fact that these previous components used to have that as how do I put this? Different components of the big picture. They don't tell you the entire thing. They're just saying, hey, you have a problem here, you have a problem there. But as a it's really interesting, man. That makes me think that, do I need a CNAPP today though? Like I have a CSPM already. I have a CWPP as well. Does that mean I should go look for a CNAPP right now?
Well, frankly speaking, the industry. I mean, if you even see the analyst world, Gartner has barely just started speaking about CNAPP, and one fact remains that CNAPP is a maturity curve. So you would first want to make sure that now you could go for a CNAPP vendor, anyone who offers CNAPP, but you may choose to start from implementing the CSPM capabilities first because that's kind of the low hanging fruit. You may want to enable the CWPP next, from the same platform. And then you may want to also enable the DevSecOps piece to reduce the cost of doing security, also to reduce the mean time to remediations, right? And then eventually achieve the final goal of CNAPP. Now, what CNAPP is not is you bring in CNAPP, you press a button, and you start seeing the breach paths, right, or the attack paths. That's not realistic, at least in 2021. Of course, in the next few years of time, the technology might mature to a level where data collection becomes kind of so mature that all the data which is required for CNAPP to work might be easy to collect and acquire on day zero. But that's not the case today. You need to be able to acquire a lot of data to be able to get to the analysis piece, which is the core of CNAPP, right? Otherwise, you're good with just CSPM and CWPP for that matter, right?
Interesting. And I just got a message. So just taking a moment to acknowledge. One of our regular, Vineet, couldn't log in today, or at least having internet issues. So he said hi to everyone over here. And for the listeners who are 50 listeners who are listening in. So just wanted to say hi. So I get that. I get where you're coming from. And I also understand the fact that maybe not the first step to kind of click deploy and suddenly you have attack paths everywhere from end to end. There's a lot more moving parts to it. Maybe it's a good moment to kind of take a step back and go, so what's this cloud native security that people talk about? Because I feel like what we've spoken about as an example of EC2 is everyone's talking about it. But there's another conversation that a lot of people are having out about Kubernetes, Terraform, like, hey, I want to go multi-cloud, cloud native. So maybe something along the lines of cloud native security. That what is cloud native according to you, and what does cloud native security mean for you?
So see, the definition of cloud native for a lot of people have evolved. There was a big part of the community who believed, up until recently, that cloud native strictly means, running your applications on workloads which you don't have to manage the infrastructure for. And it's a responsibility of the cloud provider, the CSP, to manage the infrastructure. And in some shape or form, people started associating cloud native strictly to container based or serverless based kind of architectures, right? However, recently I've kind of spoken to a lot of different CTOs and CCOs, and I'm understanding that definition has evolved. And now, one of the latest definitions that I have come across, and mind you, these are all controversial definitions. A lot of
Right.
people derive the meaning of cloud native from CNCF. Now,
Right.
CNCF does everything which is pretty much around Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
A lot of other projects that they have, it's pretty much around that kind of architecture. So Kubernetes is, in my opinion, is not just Kubernetes, which is cloud native. And my opinion is that now anything and everything that allows you to build architectures purely on cloud-based environments is cloud native using cloud services. So, for example, even EC2 instances, I mean, I know what I'm going to say is a little controversial. For a long time, I have believed myself that, cloud native strictly relates to, container serverless based architectures, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't get to know what's happening behind the scene, and you don't have to. You just package everything in containers, and container becomes actually a integral component of application layer, despite of having elements of infrastructure in it, right? That's why it
Yeah.
became cloud native. But my understanding today is that every service that is available on cloud environments, if you're using those services to build your architecture, that's the cloud native architecture. The moment you have a hybrid approach where you have some uh, portions of your architecture running on premise, right? That's where the kind of Durand line, if I can call it, comes,
Mhm.
because between the cloud and the on premise, and that's where your cloud native definitions start to break up. Otherwise, for me, if you are running a web application on an EC2 instance, that is a cloud native architecture, in my personal opinion.
Interesting. And I think we have got, I think Sangam Biradar. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Just left a comment as well. Definitely, I think technology has changed over time, and cloud native adoption is growing over time. So CNAPP is definitely needed. Yeah, so I think that's based on the previous comment that you mentioned about whether we actually need it or not. But thanks for sharing that, Sangam. So we've kind of explored cloud native definition to what you said. If it's hosted in EC2 in the AWS, I guess in AWS, Azure, or wherever, whichever cloud environment.
Yeah.
And I agree with you in the definition having its own variations among different people. Like a lot of people, when you say cloud native, they automatically think it's talking about containers or Kubernetes or like one of those kinds, just defined by CNCF.
Yeah.
Even though all these providers are already part of it. And then there is another definition where people talk about if you use services from your cloud service provider, that's also cloud native. And like, well, which one is it? It's like, but somehow, anyway, everyone has their opinion on this. But what are some of the traits, or I guess for people to kind of think about from a security perspective, like what are some of the things that define these days cloud native? Because you know how we kind of went in the history with CASB, CSPM. Is there a version to that as well? Like how has that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, during the, so CASB started around 2010, 11. A couple of vendors had, kind of introduced the technology. Uh, CASB mostly focused on proxy-based technology to protect your data and its confidentiality, the data that would have left your secure trust boundary and would have gone into the cloud environments, right? And it was primarily designed also to solve the problem of shadow IT, right? In any given organization, if you have hundreds of employees, everybody has their own favorite cloud service that they want to use. How secure those services are, and which services should be allowed for employees. So that's kind of a shadow IT problem. CASB was designed for that mostly, and of course it has evolved. CASB itself has evolved, has now got a lot of different capabilities. It's phenomenal to see CASB's growth. I mean, we can see Zscaler, how Zscaler has come along, and various different other vendors in that space. Cloud native world, the hope was, and see, around 2014, 15, when the container orchestration wars, when they began, right? Four different players. We had Docker Swarm on one corner, and your show has a feel to it. You should one day do something around cloud native wars, or the container orchestration wars. That's where all the cloud native kind of thing emerged, or the evolution emerged from there on. So you had Docker Swarm on one side, you had Kubernetes on one side, and of course you had two other players. One was Cloud Foundry, which is now a different thing altogether, and you also had Mesos, and a couple of other vendors were also trying to
That's
attempt
right. Yeah.
container orchestration. When the container orchestration wars were over and officially kind of Kubernetes won, the war, it was being hoped, or it was being thought, that now Kubernetes is going to be the new operating system for the cloud. And everything that runs on top of it, right, is something which is going to provide immediate value to the application technology world, right? However, and that's what drive that is what was driving people to believe that cloud native now means anything and everything that you are running on top of Kubernetes, and you don't even get to know as a consumer that what kind of Kubernetes is actually running behind the scene. So that's where you saw the emergence of EKS, GK kind of existed, but EKS, AKS, GK, and now you have D2IQ and many other platforms, right?
Yep.
So they like to tout themselves as cloud native, right?
Yep.
But that hasn't really happened. Like, all workloads are not on Kubernetes, all workloads are not on containers, as much as I would want them to be, right? But that's
Yep.
not the ground reality. And so the CSPs started putting together another narrative into the industry that, okay, listen, what is the difference between cloud native and what we offer as services for bringing up your infrastructure? Like, in case of EC2 instances or virtual instances, for Azure or other instances in GCP, nobody gets to know what they are running behind the scene, what hypervisors are. We don't even have to know that. We don't even care, right?
Yep.
Maybe everything is so hyper virtualized that maybe we are in the seventh dimension of the virtualization, right? Maybe there's a virtual machine, and inside that there's another virtual machine inside the EC2 that we get. Maybe it's the sixth layer of the virtualization. Who knows, right? We don't even
Yep.
know,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yeah.
so CSP started talking that, okay, we need to break through this narrative because we don't want confusion to happen that, it's not a bad or good thing to be or be not to be cloud native, right? Suddenly that became a status symbol kind of thing. Oh,
Yep.
what? We are 100% cloud native. Yeah, what does it mean? And that's when, people started defining some terms like immutable infrastructure, for example, right? So one of the traits of cloud native infrastructure is it has to be designed with immutability in mind. And
Right.
immutability has two components to it. One is rip and replace strategy. That means
Yep.
nothing is going to get changed in the production or in operations, but you will replace it, right?
Yep.
With that came the need for hyper automation. So how can you do rip and replace if you cannot programmatically do that? And if
Yep.
you programmatically do that, that means there's an opportunity for you to code it or to script it. And that's
Yep.
where the emergence of ISC happened. Of course, Terraforms and other technologies existed after 2014, but it was 2016 onwards when we saw tremendous growth around Terraform kind of technologies, right? That's what kind of came to the rescue for the industry. So anything that you can do with Terraform today in the cloud world, now it is considered that is what is cloud native, basically, as an example. Or you can do it with
Right.
CM, ARM, Polomi. There are other ISC technologies. I don't want to name one vendor here,
Yeah.
but can you spin virtual instances using Terraform? Absolutely. Can you
Yep.
create network layers using Terraform? Absolutely. Now,
Yep.
can you also spin Kubernetes using Helm charts? Yes, you can, right?
Yep.
So that's now, for as long as you can achieve immutability, and your hyper automation, that is what is defining cloud native. Now, what I'm predicting already, I've been talking to a few people that as soon as these two capabilities are brought into the on-premise world as well, right? Because even that world is going to undergo a change where everything will be API driven, and then you can have ISC technologies supporting immutability and hyper automation even for on-premise environments. So then, what are you going to call that? Cloud native on premise, right? Or what? So these are some of the nuances. So I guess cloud native now is being understood as if you are adopting highly programmable and immutable based architecture, where your strategy is rip and replace. You do not have to worry about various other operational overheads. That is the architecture which is cloud native.
Interesting. We've got an interesting definition from Sangam as well. Sangam's definition is, my definition, cloud native is about culture, not containers. There's another version there, but sorry, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think the programmatic approach and the immutability, as much as being strategy, it is also the cultural shift, right? I mean, the IT ops who were never used to write code for
Yep.
doing operations now have to bring the shift into the culture. And now and one thing that what Sangam is raising is absolutely true, is that cloud engineering is more and more becoming like software engineering, because you're writing a lot of software to maintain and manage your client. And that's a big cultural change, right?
Yep.
So I
Yep.
agree with that. It's also there's a cultural shift element as well to that.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that comment as well, Sangam, because it's really interesting that you mentioned the cultural shift, both you and Sangam as well, because a lot of conversation initially was talking also about, hey, security folks should learn how to code, but people were, oh, what does that really mean? And then came the whole policy and code as code as well. So keeping that whole CNAPP thing in mind with cloud native application protection platform, or as they want to call it, so the we spoke about the end-to-end piece. We spoke about the pieces where, oh, okay, so I'm starting from the left, and we've kind of, I love how the conversation has gone so far, because we've kind of touched on a few things, and now we kind of realized, okay, this is what cloud native is. So in my mind, CNAPP is more suited for people who are already doing IAC or infrastructure as code, using Terraform, Pulumi, or whatever one of those languages to provision infrastructure of any kind. And as that kind of provisions, and you kind of reach the configuration stage. So it sounds like an end-to-end, like if I were to take a step back and go, it's like a big picture view of what a newly defined cloud native application should look like from I guess protection perspective. Would that be right?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And this is again part of the evolution. So as the realization has kind of been observed and achieved by the industry, that look, if cloud native strategies are being used for provisioning application, I mean, ultimately you do everything. You build the infrastructure to host your revenue generating applications, right? Those, they are
Yep.
the ones which generate the applications are the one which generate your revenue.
Yep.
So if the applications are being provisioned, packaged, deployed more and more using cloud native strategies, and as I said, two traits, right? Programmatic, way of provisioning, immutability. That means now the security also gets an opportunity to start detecting problems even before the environments are built, because a lot of the definitions of your environment or the cloud infrastructure are defined within the code that you're writing, whether it is Terraform, CloudFormation templates, Azure Resource Manager templates, or many other type of ISCs, including Hemchart, Customize, YAMLs, things like those. So if those are intelligently analyzed, 80% of the cyber hygiene and security posture related issues can be detected from them. Now, if you detect your security issues at the time when this code is being written or when the code is being passed through the pipeline, you are doing tremendous cost savings in terms of detection cost for security point of view. And you get an opportunity to do early remediation, which is a huge deal in the cloud world, because the applications are running faster than anybody else in terms of development velocity, right? Every day we get 10 different we don't even get to know how many new versions of Netflix gets released on daily basis, right? So it's
Yeah.
fast. That means you have to have an opportunity to detect problems at a low cost, because you cannot be affording to detect them, all of them in the runtime. You need runtime security like an insurance, but you have to be able to detect things early so that you can reduce mean time to remediation. Because it's not the detection which is a biggest problem of industries. If you notice any kind of breaches that have happened today, breaches, of course, detection still has to work. Without detection, you cannot patch or you cannot remediate, right? But
Yep.
the MTTR has to be reduced. And that's one advantage that you get, as CNAPP defines clearly, that you have to be able to do your cloud security from left, and then you have to go all the way till the right, and you have to achieve different goals of different stages. Like you have to be able to early detection, reduce mean time to remediation from the left. On the runtime, continuously defend and detect any leftovers, right? Like you cannot underestimate runtime security. You have to do it.
Yep.
That's kind of the whole objective of CNAPP.
That's so much to unpack there as well. It's exactly as you mentioned. Mean time to detection is always easy because there's so many tools for it. Remediation is the harder part. That's where the whole auto remediation came in. Hey, don't worry about you. How do you detect and get to it? Let me auto remediate for you that as well. That's the whole CSP con. That was quite interesting at that point as well. But so actually, I've got a few comments over here just quickly. Hey Martinez, so he was even from the UK. So they were stuck in traffic. The roads were closed. No problem, man. Thanks for coming in. Zenith has a comment as well. I agree. Detection isn't a problem really. Reducing the mean time to remediation should be the focus. 100%. I think we're definitely finding that as a team where it's easy. Like we have the right tool sets in the, I guess, arsenal for lack of a better word, but getting to the problem, how do we solve the problem is probably the harder piece. So taking that a step further, then if I'm a CISO or if I'm like a security lead in a company who's now realized that, oh, I've got cloud native infrastructure running, or my applications are cloud native, and I need to figure this out. I heard this inspiring history from Om, and now I feel like I need to do something about this. What's a good place to start thinking about security for cloud native? In a very, it doesn't have to be a complex scenario. In a very simple use case, someone's starting today, trying to get their head around cloud native or securing cloud native applications. What should they be looking at?
Right. Well, for as much as I want to say and talk about security, we could discuss about a lot of security controls that can, be potentially applied in such kind of environment. But the fact remains, my mentor told me like 15 years ago when I was part of initiatives around ITGRC. So before CASB, the industry was doing ITGRC, just ITGRC everywhere.
Right.
So at that time, my mentor, who's based out of Melbourne, actually, he had a favorite line. He used to speak a lot. It's all about visibility, right?
Yeah.
So, well, the first thing that CISO will have to do is figure out whether CISO has visibility into, all potential business critical assets or not. So it has nothing got to do with security to begin with. The first step is about asset visibility, asset classification, because if you don't have visibility, you can't secure anyways, right?
Yeah.
So you need to first figure that thing out. And it's unfortunate that figuring that thing out in 2021 still is a challenge, right? Especially when you talk about so-called quote unquote cloud native world, right? How do you figure out, first of all, right, that let's talk about a non-containerized environment, right? How do you figure out how many workloads today are running? Those workloads that are running, they use how many other different kind of resources, right? Because cloud has got really a lot of different services, and each service can spin a resource. You need to have eye upon them. You need to then figure out what is the data classification or criticality of those assets, how many of them are business critical from revenue point of view, and then you start designing your security controls based on the objectives that you want to achieve, right? You may have compliance objectives, then you have nowhere to go. You have to do those controls which they are asking you to do. It doesn't matter if the compliance controls are securing you or not, right? See, hackers don't care whether you have a compliance certification or not, right? So first you need to figure out like that. And by the time you figure out all of this, 18 months are over. And a shelf life of a CISO is not more than 18 months, right? And then you have to come back and think, oh, you know what? I have to secure as well. So now, serious point about that is that, well, if you are an organization which is decently matured, and all the foundation and fundamentals are at least there, like in terms of asset visibility, asset classifications, and you have basic fundamentals in place, then definitely you must start first by conducting extensive threat assessments, but in terms of threat models first. Understand what are the specific type of threats that your type of organization, the organization that you're working for, and you can correlate industry metrics there and many other kind of aspects like technology stacks, you know, what are the actual threats that you may face? Then start thinking about, you know, how much of targeted, you know, attacks versus scavenger type of attacks you could face because of the technologies that you might be using, right? You may, you know, you may kind of, you know, figure out that, you know what, you're using WordPress, and if you're using WordPress in your tech stack, then of course, you know, those adversaries which are called as, you know, opportunistic attackers, who are not necessarily after you, who are after anybody on internet, right? With common set of tools, the hacking tools that they're using, right? Then you definitely are in the line of sight for them too, if they get to know your IP addresses and other things. So you have to
Yep.
worry about protecting against those kind of adversaries. And then if you belong to, say, critical infrastructure, you belong to some kind of industry, then you also need to put in effort to analyze your threat, you know, landscape in terms of potential adversaries that can come after you. There could be nation states, there could be, you know, other adversary groups. So one of the methods that has become very popular is called as diamond model, where you basically use your organization's tech stack versus the, you know, adversary capability information that is available from a lot of different, you know, frameworks. MITRE has it, you know, attack framework also gives you that. And then you map and see that the tech stack that you have versus the adversary groups that are out there whose information is available, who is that adversary group whose favorite attack technique maps to your technology stack, right? So those are the kind of attacks that are potentially going to come after you, right? And
Yeah.
then you design your security control. This is not for compliance, right? Compliance,
Yeah.
you have to do, you know, 32 character passwords, right? There's no guarantee they're going to protect you, but you have to do that, right? So
Yeah.
compliance, I'm not talking about that, but security, yes. Then you start designing your controls accordingly. You know what, I need to be able to detect, I need to be able to you know, prioritize, I need to be able to see enriched data. Like, you know, you may decide that, you know what, one of the controls I want to have, this particular region of the world, we don't have any customers, we don't have anything to do with that region, I'm going to block the hell out of it, right? I'm not going to take that risk. And then you start kind of understanding your threat landscape more and more, design your controls to bring your residual risk towards those threats, right,
Yep.
lower as possible. You know, when I was very young, you know, I thought, you know, watching so many different Hollywood movies, I always thought, you know what, there are these silver bullets. You know, a hacker sits behind the laptop, and so the defender could sit behind the laptop. You can protect, right? Fact of the matter is, cybersecurity is a journey. It's not destination. Uh, Things are constantly evolving. You need to make it as much more difficult as much you can for the attackers and adversaries to cause harm, right? So you need to be able to defeat these adversaries on their in their mission, even if you're not able to protect a hack. But if you can make sure that if the hacker hacks in, the hacker is not able to succeed in the mission, you would still come out as a winner, right? So if you have that
Yep.
adversarial, tactical, you know, and strategical, you know, mentality as a CISO, you'll be able to then protect well. But definitely, you need to understand who are your adversaries, right? You have to understand that better in order to then design your controls in a more better way.
It's a great answer because I forgot for a second you're a fellow CISO as well, so you definitely would understand this quite a deep, quite have a deep understanding of this. I think another question that I get asked when I talk about cloud native security by a lot of CISOs that we kind of have, or at least have as listeners, or even security leaders for that matter, is that hey, we have a SIEM, so we don't have to worry about like whatever throw at anything at me. I can make sure I can. To your point, get visibility of any threats that may be coming across there. Like obviously, CNAPP sounds like it's more of a taking a step back in the big picture thing. You're going all the way from the IAC or infrastructure is written as code all the way to the runtime piece. But we didn't really clarify. So the runtime piece in a CNAPP category, is that done by the CSPM or is CNAPP itself has the capability? So, I mean, and that's what goes into a SIEM. Like, or is there a point of talking about SIEM in this context at all, I guess?
No, very interesting question. Look, from the same point of view, I partly agree, to the statement that you made, or what some of your fellows have kind of spoken, and partly disagree because, see, in cybersecurity world also, right? I mean, look, there has been a saying for so long, I'm secure because I have a firewall, right? Um, or for that matter, I'm secure because I have an antivirus, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
remember that.
yeah, so SIEM, of course, is a great technology. Uh, you know, uh, ArcSight, brought it into the commercial world. Maybe there were, a few open source projects before that. So SIEM goes much beyond 2001, right? So SIEM has
Yeah.
existed since 1999, 2000. So, um, and it's a very efficient, very, very efficient tool. You can achieve a lot out of it. Absolutely, you can achieve a lot out of it. Now, it totally depends how skillful that team is, which is using SIM, right?
Mhm.
How much skills are expected from your internal SecOps teams or internal security operations team, which, is able to enrich, detect, right? Do threat hunting. If you have that much skillful team, which can do all of this, right? You can then do it using a lot of open source technology as well. You don't really need commercial technology to be able to do that, right? So so yes, I agree with the fact that SIEMs have come a long way, and they have a lot of capabilities. They can do a lot, but with SIEMs you need a lot more skill to be able to fetch the greatness out of it, right? And that's where I guess some of the problems are. So SIEMs are not going anywhere. SIEMs are here to stay.
Yeah.
To your second part of the question, what about CNAPP, right? Is it going to be disrupting some elements of SIEM? Um, so the answer is sort of yes, but strictly, I believe, for cloud world. Look, SIEM, is not just cloud, right? It is a lot more about on-premise as well, a lot
That's
more
right.
on-cloud workloads as well, right? It can ingest a great deal of data from sources which CNAPP is right now not designed, or is not being spoken about from the CNAPP's strategy point of view, right? CNAPP
Yeah.
is purely focusing on cloud. However, there is going to be certain elements that is going to overlap between CNAPP and SIM from the cloud point of view. Uh,
Mhm.
at this time, it's not. I would say, the CNAPP has to mature for us to be able to see that is it going to totally replace SIM in the cloud world, right? But a lot of elements are going to overlap, and I believe uh, for cloud native environments at some point in time, CNAPPs are going to include a great deal of features what SIMs carry today for non-cloud world. That is going to happen.
Interesting. So SIEM is going to still continue to play a part in this somewhere, but maybe not because moving forward, if you're living in a hybrid world where we have cloud, on-prem, IoT, all these other living on edge, 5G, like all
Yeah.
that, that's not cloud. That's a lot more there than just the cloud for any CISO to be dealing with.
Right.
So 100% agree with you on that one as well. I think so from a visibility perspective, I guess. So what should technically, like, because you're a CISO as well. So what's from a visibility perspective that you mentioned earlier, that hey, that's probably the first step that you're trying to grab onto.
Yeah.
What kind of elements are you looking for from a security perspective for cloud native? Because I guess you mentioned the fact that having visibility of asset inventory. Now, since someone has defined what that is,
Yeah.
are there like, I don't know, I think the right word probably is like, if I've already got like a 10 Kubernetes cluster kind of environment,
Mhm.
it's a massive application, and hey, go deal with this. Are there a certain level of maturity that you see in the way people do cloud native security, people who understand it and have visibility? Like, what does that look like?
Right. Well, yeah, one aspect definitely which is superior in in pure Kubernetes-based architectures is it is far more, I would say, consistent in terms of its workload management, and so therefore it is far more, I would say, straightforward. There's still a lot of effort needed, but the complexity levels, I would say, are uh, not up to in a way where you have to deal with 20 different types of things versus dealing one type of thing. So in the world of Kubernetes, it is far more straightforward to gain visibility into the workloads. So as you said, you have 10 clusters, right? Each cluster has its own etc database. uh,
Hmm.
you go ahead and do whatever you want to do. You can write your own scripts, or you can use vendors, you can use products which can just fetch all information from etcd. Everything is defined as a kind in
Yeah.
Kubernetes, right? You get to see all your namespaces, you get to see all your pods, you get to see all your containers running within each pod, right? And then you can see a lot of all the services running around them as well. You can see ingress, you can see a lot of different type of kinds which are running. So it's one single place where you can fetch all this information. Of course, you still have to do the dissecting work. You have to bring these assets in, and you have to define them. Each asset type has to be defined, and you have to classify things like those. But you can achieve a lot of this using infrastructure automation as well. When you are spinning assets, you can kind of push a policy. You can have your infrastructure teams follow some policies that do proper tagging. If you are spinning applications in this namespace, tag them using these values, and then you can use those to kind of define your business criticality as well. So in Kubernetes world, it is, I would say, still straightforward. Once you have gained that visibility, right? You know how many clusters you have, you know how many namespaces you have, you know how many pods you have. Start off first by detecting your, say, CI's benchmark levels, right? For all of them, see how much of compliance is there from CI's point of view. See what controls you may really want to be enabled if they are not enabled from configurations point of view. Keep a tight grip on the exposure piece, right? Expose as little as what you can, and don't expose too many services or too many resources. And from there on, start building your security controls on top of it. So you identify that, okay, you know what, for this particular cluster, I need to be able to do traffic inspection, I need to be able to do vulnerability detection, I need to be able to scan the container images which are living in the registry. Or there could be some cluster which maybe has a crown jewel service running or application running, and you may want to use admission controller there, right, to ensure that certain policies are never breached. So as a CISO, you want to make sure, I do not ever want overly permissive RBAC on this
Hmm.
namespace here, because this is going to be a conduit to a volume or a database, right? And I just don't want any extra permissions to be going on this. So you can create such kind of policies, push them into admission controller, and you can block them, right? So anybody attempting to do that will not be able to do it. But that's like last mile enforcement. So
Yep.
these controls then are possible to design once you have gained visibility. In a non-Kubernetes world, on the other side, things are a little tricky, right? Because each service provider, each CSP, right, has its own way of defining resources. Like today, around 250 different type of resources are possible on AWS. Similar number are possible on Azure, right? And then you have a little bit 10-20% up and down in GCP. And
Yeah.
each of the resources, right? Like for example, in AWS, a security group is a resource. It's not a workload, it's a resource. Now it has
Yep.
been defined differently. What are the nuances of that, right? So in the CSP world, that's where you need more help coming in from commercial products who have spent a lot of time understanding these different asset types, these resources, and what are their security implications, what are their security misconfigurations, or what are the connections or the relationships that these resources possess, which can trigger a attack scenario.
Hmm.
That's where the CSPMs of the world are investing a lot of time
Yeah.
for consumers to kind of not become entangled in all of this.
It's very interesting, and I love that the way you defined it as to the two different kinds of workload. Probably define what kind of approach you need to take from a visibility and security perspective.
Yeah.
For people who may be listening in from like the CNAPP perspective, you mentioned DevSecOps, and if you're shifting to the left, there's always this confusion that a lot of people have that, hey, it sounds like a security tool, but a security tool that needs help from DevOps or developers. So should they be looking after this, or should we be looking after this? Who looks after, in your opinion, who looks after CNAPP usually? Like, is that like just the security team or the DevOps team or the devs themselves who's looking after this, or at least the stuff that's being alerted over there?
Well, see, you rightly said developers still have nothing got to do with security, application
Yeah.
developers, right? Although the cultural shift is happening, we are seeing a lot more organizations are making a mandate for developers to start getting trained on fundamentals of security and start doing secure coding practices, things like those, right? Some elements of security are coming in, but still by and large developers unfortunately hate security, or for that matter they hate anything else which comes in their way of releasing the software quickly and in a timely fashion, right? So from that cultural aspect, the way CNAPP and similar kind of products they work is that their primary goal is to embed security into existing developer workflows, right? From detection point of view, as well as in some cases from remediation point of view, but in such a way that that fusion or that instrumentation has to happen in such a way in in a manner where the developers don't even get to know that there is some security tool working behind the scene, right? The moment you ask developers, you know what, we need to introduce this particular security tool in your workflow, but from today onwards, one of the processes that you are following is not going to be same. It is changing. They're not going to adopt it. They will only adopt things when things are working seamlessly behind the scene. So as an example, let's say I'm a Terraform developer. I'm writing a bunch of code and I've written the code. Now I want to check that code into say Bitbucket or GitHub, right? Now, as a developer, don't ask me to fire another process to scan that code. You want to do the scanning, you do it. I shouldn't even get to know it. And if something goes wrong in your scanning process, just send me a pull request or a ticket, right? I will look into it, right? But don't tell me to fire anything else, right? And
Yeah.
don't disrupt my workflow, right? So therefore, products like CNAPP, all the DevSecOps based products have to ensure that they're introducing security validation gateways and other kind of detection processes into existing developer workflows and do not introduce a new workflow. So embed yourself with a source code repository base, kind of integration in such a way the developer doesn't even get to know it, or with
Yep.
Python, right? Or with something which is called as pull request interception, pull request review kind of thing, right? That
Yep.
is when you will see the adoption is happening. Otherwise, adoption will not happen. But the results, as you asked, who's going to view the results? So still, the operation responsibility for security point of view is with CISOs. The remediation responsibility has shifted to left with engineering, right?
Yep.
CISOs will keep the visibility from security, operations point of view, but they use shift left. CISOs are using shift left for policy enforcement and for early detection and reduction of cost of security, right? So what they want to decide is CISOs wants to decide that, you know what, these are 10 things that I do not want developers ever to do. Like for example, in case of AWS, again, in EC2, there's a configuration called as instance metadata service, which has
Yep.
been the reason behind a lot of breaches, right? So as a CISO, I do not want any developer to ever write a Terraform code with a EC2 instance that is enabling that, right? So I want to be able to enforce that, but I want to do that in such a way that developers should not get interrupted in their code development process. So I would want to then use a product or a tool which goes and integrates with source code management tool in such a way the developer writes the code, checks the code in, and now developer just gets the code back saying that, sorry, I cannot accept this because there's a security problem in that. That is still okay with them because the developer is dealing only with source code management tool. If you will, as a developer, before you check the code into GitHub, upload this code onto this new product UI, see what the results are. If the results are good, then upload it. They're going to say, you know what? They're going to use a term which is used commonly in Australia, which
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with you, and as well because this is kind of where a lot of the initial lack of maturity that people talk about with CSPM as well, where it was almost like the work is done by engineering, but there was no visibility of what was being found for engineering. But the visibility piece was always, hey, go to this website to see what the result is. Or I think now that I think about it after this conversation, even the Slack notification truly, that's probably not, or even Teams notification or whatever, that's not truly native for them as well. They still have to like go away from what they were doing onto this another application, because Slack is usually, or Slack or Teams usually for just conversations, right? It's not about, hey, or maybe someone's raised an issue, trying to collaborate together. Like, it's not for finding bugs for your code that you've written down. So I love what you've described over there. Just conscious of time as well. Sorry, go on.
The developers live by just three tools, right? IDE, SCM, source code management tool, and the pipeline. For as long as you are playing within these three tools, they'll be okay.
Yeah, that's right. And as long as if feedback comes there itself instead of on this another platform, I think you'll probably be having a very security first culture at that point as well. I guess maybe that's another definition of having a security first culture, to be able to integrate where your colleagues are, for lack of a better word. I just want to make sure, because I'm just conscious of our time as well, and your time as well.
Yeah.
I think I've covered all the questions over there, but towards the end, I've got 3 questions, which are just like general questions, just for people to get to know you a bit. And there are too many. So the first one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on cloud native or technology?
Well, I'm a ferocious reader, and these days I spend a lot of time reading different types of encyclopedias, for my daughter.
Oh, nice.
Trying to make sure that she learns a few things. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Maybe you should. It's good. I wish I'm an envious, ferocious reader. And since that, I wish I could read as much as other people, but I don't enough. So the next question I have is, what is something that you're proud of, but is not on your social media? Something that you're proud of, but is not on your social media.
Well, I represented Australia in Cyber Olympics in 2012. And
wow.
I don't think so that's there anywhere on my social media.
Wow. Wait, is that even a thing? I didn't even realize there was a cybersecurity Olympics.
Yeah, it's an EC Council event. They kind of do these regional hacking competitions. So, I was in Australia at that time. So I represented Australia, came to Miami in US.
Wow. There you go. Well, it's always, I'm glad Australia was represented by someone as talented as you, man. That's pretty awesome. Final question. What is your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
My favorite cuisines have been mostly Indian, but of late, thanks to my wife, she's introduced me to different kind of cuisines. So it's now fettuccine. What's kind of my favorite, and in Chicago there are a lot of different kind of restaurants, but there's a chain here next to my state. So we live in Illinois. Next to my state is Iowa. Vinny Venuti. I just love them for the fettuccine that they do.
Interesting. No, thanks for sharing that. By the way, for people who may have, and that's pretty much the end of the fun question as well, but for people who may want to reach out to you for further clarification or reach out for in general, if you can tell us where people can find you, and just about a little bit about Accurics as well. Accurics as well. So too many so Accurics as well.
Yeah. Well, people can reach me on my Twitter handle, Umaitrika, which is my daughter's name. And
Nice. Oh, I'll leave that in the show notes as well, by the way, so people can find you there.
well, I made sure that at least I'm giving her one asset when she grows up, which is a digital asset. So
Digital asset, yeah.
yeah,
Like maybe want to make it an NFT one day as well.
yeah. And otherwise I could be reached on LinkedIn too. I'm mostly on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm unfortunately not on Instagram or on Facebook. And regarding Accurics, so we started. We were a shift left CSPM product when we began, but we kind of developed a lot of capability around CSPM and runtime CSPM as well. And we recently became part of Tenable, one of my dream, I would say, companies. I started my career actually coding on Nes's platform back in 2007. So it's funny that I've landed with Tenable. So yeah.
Wow. I'll definitely leave all the show notes. I like at least links in the show notes as well. But thank you so much for coming in. I'd really appreciate the time you spent with us and the knowledge you've shared as well. I'm sure everyone else did as well. So I do really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashish, for having me. Appreciate
No
it.
problem. And for everyone else watching in, I will see you all next week with another episode of our Trends for Cloud Security, which is the month of October. So I'll see you all next weekend. Have a safe one, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.